Welcome everybody to the Wednesday, July 12th, 2017 special edition meeting of SIG Service Catalog. Today we're going to be talking about which issues we feel are required for bringing the Service Catalog to a beta level. So Aaron is going to share his screen and has generously volunteered to take notes. I will be honest with everybody, I have not had a single moment to go through any of the issues. So I suspect also that the other folks present on the call have not had a chance to go through every single issue. I suggest that as a formula for this meeting, which I doubt that we will be able to successfully go through everything in a single hour, and I'm very happy and interested in having another one of these either tomorrow or on Friday as necessary to reach a conclusion. Let's just talk about issues, and we can get a read of whether people feel they are necessary for beta. Does anybody have a better idea?
So I went through and, as I mentioned last time, I tried to categorize things. I did put the top 3 issues that I thought were either very critical or at least have concrete proposals for us to discuss at the top of the list. And I was assuming we were not going to get past the first 3 today, to be honest.
Okay. Well, should we take those up then?
Yeah, as long as no one has a better idea in terms of agenda.
I think that's a fine start.
Okay, so the first thing on the agenda was an update from you, Paul, on what happened in SIG auth today relative to secrets and our use of them.
Okay, well, I have good news. So we, in the space of the 7 or 8 weeks that we've been talking about this in the different areas of the community, have talked ourselves back basically to the initial idea that I think that we had for solving the problem of how do you send parameters that are based on secrets. And the gist of what I what I presented to SIG auth was that we would use something that is like topologically equivalent to you reference a secret and a key from the instance resource and from the binding resource, and use that to get the parameters that you send to the broker. And the salient point about this is that we will not introduce a new field on either of those resources that has to be encrypted in the API server. We will not do any of the other clever but probably torturous things that were part and parcel of doing that that have been discussed. So the TLDR is that we can reference secret keys from our resources, but we cannot write a controller that watches all secrets. And what that means for us in the short term is that if we write an instance that references secret X and key Y, that we, as far as responding to a change in that secret, like say that I have a secret parameter there and I go and I update the secret, the controller will only be able to respond to that change if there is a resync that's done in the controller, or something else changes about the pod to create a watch event for the controller. Does everybody understand what that means in terms of the controller periodically relists all of the resources in our API and reconciles each of them? And since a change can be made to the secret that's out of band from what the controller watches, we'll have to either wait until we pick up that resource that references the secret in a relist, or the user will have to do something to that resource to result in a watch event going to the controller.
Isn't there currently a support for individual watch?
There is going to be, but it's not going to be delivered before Kubernetes 1.8 at the earliest. So that's a good segue into long-term. What we'll do, instead of having a controller that watches all secrets in the cluster, is we'll be able in the controller to do individual watches on secret and so instead of watching all the secrets, we'll be able to say, I want to watch secret X in namespace Y. I want to watch secret A in namespace B. And I only want to get watch events for those secrets, which is a significantly diminished level of privilege from being able to see all secrets throughout the cluster. Today, you can write an RBAC rule that grants access to an individual resource. So coupling that existing RBAC capability with the coming ability to watch specific resources, we can have the right usage pattern so that we don't have to have a controller that has both the ability to watch all secrets and actually tries to do it, which is the thing that SIG-Off has wanted to avoid with good reason. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, I just wonder if there is a 1.8 which will bring individuals secret watch, whether it makes sense to implement the release at all or just treat secrets as immutable.
I'm sorry, you kind of trailed off.
Can we just treat the secret as immutable until the individual secret watch is implemented?
We can't, because they are not immutable.
Well, yes, but for example, I think I have given this example before that, with deployments, if only the volume is updated, and if you don't redeploy, there is no release on deployment to make sure that the secret is injected.
I'm sorry, I think I misunderstood you. I think another way to state what you're saying is that we should only do a parameter update as an example when we have an explicit signal from the user.
Yeah.
I think that could be an option. I'm not sure that would be the kind of experience that people would want, but I think that there's two different facets here that we've discussed. The first one is that we do have confirmation that we can make a solution that uses references to secret keys from our API. I think that's good. We have some closure on that. And the second facet is, now that we know that we can do that, what is the right experience to implement for people, since we will not immediately have the ability to do the type of watch that would allow us to implement an experience where, as a user, I reference secret key in my instance as a parameter, and then I say, okay, I'm going to update that secret key, and I want that to immediately result in when I say update the secret key, I mean actually update the secret object and change the content of that key, and that immediately results in a parameter update going to the broker. We're not going to be able to achieve that. I think the question is, what is the best thing that we can do short of that?
Paul, there is a temporary workaround. I think someone has suggested in the issue regarding the pod that you can just rename the secret, which means that you will have to update the binding referencing this secret, which will mean that it will be picked up. So it's not the best, of course, but for now, until for a quarter or so, it could be fine.
Yeah, and I certainly think it would be sufficient for now, because at this when I say for now, I mean in jest, like at this moment, because we don't do any updates. So it would totally be sufficient with today's catalog. I tell you what, I think that as far as what we hoped to decide in this meeting, I think that this is definitely something that has to be done for beta. I think that we know part of the solution now, which is that we can write an API that references keys. I don't know if folks would like to do some design work right now on what the right way to do, what the right way to use that would be. It might be something, since I've just transmitted this information, that maybe we can talk through in another design meeting very near in the future in the next few work days, and perhaps move on for now if we have agreement that we all think it's necessary for beta.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to sort of end that discussion here, because I think people need to go off and figure out, okay, we know it's okay now to use secrets for other things than just injecting the pods. So now I think it's good to make sense. I'm sorry, it'd be good to go through and enumerate all the sort of remaining holes around our use of secrets and parameters and stuff like that, and then come back on a different call once people have had a chance to organize their thoughts on it.
Okay.
So Paul or Doug, can I assign one of you guys to that to set up that new meeting and maybe write some notes in preparation for it?
Yeah, you can assign that to me. That's fine.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. So anything else related to the secrets at a high level?
That is all I have to transmit about today's interaction with SIG auth.
Okay. Any questions then for Paul before we move on? All right, cool. Moving on. The next issue on the list is scalability of retrieving service classes, issue number 454. And I picked this one because I think it could impact our model. And hopefully it's a relatively easy one. I know I probably just jinxed it. But the basic issue here is, if you look at issue 454, and actually hold on a minute, let me get the link and paste it into the chat. There you go. The basic issue here is that service class resource has all the plans nested inside of it. The plans are not additional resources that the service plan points to, rather they're nested inside of theirs, which means service classes can be really, really large if you have a lot of plans. And it gets even worse when you think about the ability for plans to have things like the schema definitions and stuff like that, which we're planning adding to the spec relatively soon. So these things are going to get really, really large. And that's going to be a scalability problem and a performance problem when clients want to list out all of the, or they ask for the list of the service offerings, or I guess service classes is our term, just to see what they could choose from. So in this particular issue, I think the very last comment that I made, I actually put a proposal in there, if you look at the very last comment, where I suggested that we pull out plans so that they are standalone resources. But within the service object themselves, we have a slice of sort of a subset of the plans. And in particular, that subset has the name of the plan itself, which is also a reference to the real object, the short description of the plan, and just an indication of whether it's free or not. The reason I chose just those three fields is because when I look at what Foundry implementations do when you ask for the marketplace, those are the three columns you get back when you list out the marketplace. So that's obviously based upon their current user experience. Those are the most important things people care about seeing at the very high level. When you're then interested in a particular service or plan, then you can dive deep and you can go back and retrieve the individual resources for that plan if necessary. But that was my initial proposal that I wanted to discuss here and see what people thought.
So my gut reaction is I think there are a few closely related problems that are bound up in the issue. Let me give my off-the-cuff decomposition of the problems. The first one is the total storage required to store a serialization of a service class and all of its plans, given that their are potentially unlimited number of plans associated with a particular service class, and I am pretty sure that there is no upper limit defined in the spec. Please correct me if I'm wrong. The second is that for each of those plans, the plan, and this issue is now in the validating through implementation phase, if I remember correctly, is that each plan can have a JSON schema for create and update, which is, in my opinion, a better API than some of the more creative approaches that we talked through to conceivably save space. But it's not so good for saving space. It's like you would get everything right on every plan. So I think there's an issue of, is plan a separate resource? And that's one issue. I actually had a different, I had apparently false memory of this scalability of retrieving service classes being something totally different. So I think that's one issue. The other is, if we do separate them, is there as Doug has proposed, some subset of the information that would be convenient to have present on the service class itself? And the more general problem of, like, even if you separate the resources, there's still there's still the problem of, in order to display all the information about them, you still have to get a lot of information. What's the best way to deal with that? And then there's another insidious problem, which is if you separate service class and service plan into different resources, how do you maintain referential integrity between those two resources? And how do you ensure that when the name of a plan changes, which is apparently a thing that can happen, how do you ensure that referential integrity is maintained across that kind of change? Did I miss anything?
So, yeah, the issue was opened originally to try and address reverse deletes. So when a broker is deleted, how do you traverse to find all the service classes that it owns? And also I think there were some similar issues to deal with resources lower in the chain, but this is just about service classes. I think we solved that issue out of band. So I just want to mention it because this issue is old and I believe it has a lot of discussion about some things that are not really relevant to this discussion. So if someone reads through them and get confused, keep that in mind.
Should since that is the case, and I have to imagine that there are going to be a number of other issues from the early days of the SIG, where we've gotten much better at delineating issues for very focused, specific things. I'm wondering if we need to create like individual issues for the different facets that remain to be solved,
Yes,
and close this one out.
Yeah, we do.
Wait, I'm confused. The initial comment in this issue talks about a performance problem for clients trying to list all the services.
Yeah, this is very short and specific.
The other issue, Aaron, that you're talking about, what is that one? Because I don't.
Yeah, maybe I got the numbering wrong. So I don't have it open right now. But there was an issue that either this includes or references this one that's about something completely different. It was about trying to traverse from a broker to all its service classes. And that's completely unrelated to what we're talking about here. I just wanted to make sure that we don't mix the two things together because they're significantly different.
Yeah, I wasn't addressing that issue at all. This is simply, as my understanding of the original issue here, is just clients want to see what's in the catalog. We need a performance, we need a solution that's performant, basically.
Okay, yeah, I do actually think this one is very focused, but let's keep that plate spinning, because there are definitely issues that cover everything from API design to probably geopolitical philosophy that should be closed and turned into more specific issues.
Sure. Okay. So sorry to sidetrack on that, but
I accept your apology.
On this, what does Kubernetes do for pagination, if anything?
Nothing.
Okay. So is it reasonable to try and invent something here?
Nope.
So what options are there, Paul?
Very, very quick, blunt answer. I like that.
Paul, maybe you should lay out some possible options that are in your mind.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to be a jerk, Aaron. I was trying to be comedic, but the short answer is, to my knowledge, there is no pagination of lists or get verbs in Kubernetes. I think that it is not our job to invent it. It is conceivably possible that we might be a forcing function for the invention of such a resource. I definitely do not think this SIG is where such a capability should be developed. I do think that it is a valid problem to try to solve, like the problem of scalability for like the original problem that this issue represents. We should probably try to figure it out. On the other hand, I'm not debating that this is a problem at all. I'm trying to think in terms of, like, is it something that we absolutely have to solve before beta? I'm not sure that it meets the criteria of does it make, is it absolutely required to make the open service broker integration rock solid?
Well, if you have to create a new resource, it means that you will have to break the API of service classes. That's my only concern here.
Yeah, that's why I put it up at the top of the list. But just to circle back around, Aaron, while I do think pagination may be a useful thing in this general context, because if you have, say, 1,000 service offerings, no matter how small we get the service class resource down, pagination may still be a good idea. I definitely agree with that in general. However, for this particular case, I think we need to be able to solve it without pagination, because even a small number of service classes could end up pulling back a ton of data simply because the JSON schema itself, in terms of relative size, is going to be probably far bigger than the information we really care about just by listing the service classes. So we need to address it even for smaller cases that don't require pagination in general.
Yeah, understood.
So for clarity, for anybody that is blissfully unaware of this, there is a limit, a upper limit on individual etcd records of 1 megabyte. That I've heard different things. I've heard both that it's a hard limit and that it's a soft limit, but things get extremely slow over that limit. So there is there's an upper bound that we want to stay under of 1 megabyte per individual resource. I do think pagination is a separate problem. I don't think we need to solve pagination for beta. I do think that we need to solve whether ServiceClass and ServicePlan are one resource or two, since as Nal has observed, we can't change that after beta without breaking the API.
Right. So in order to make progress on this, and I definitely don't mean to try to push anybody to make a hard decision here, but in order to make forward progress, what I'd like to do is ask whether the proposal that I laid out there is at least looking like it's in the right direction, or whether there's something fundamentally wrong with it. Because if it's at least in the right direction, then we can say, okay, now we can take the next step of going we can take the next step in terms of the design of it, maybe start doing a simple PR to prove a concept to play with it. But only if people are okay with that general direction and there is an alternative that people would like to consider at this point in time. Now, if the answer is, it may be okay, but you'd like more time to think about it, that's a fine answer too. But I'm just trying to get a gauge for where people's heads are at right now.
So I think it's probably worth having a 3 or 4 day kind of design discussion period on GitHub, so we can suss out the answer to that question you just posed right now, Doug. I think if nobody comes up with a better solution than that, I think that is probably the way to go. Modulo maybe getting rid of that referential integrity problem that Paul said.
Yep.
Any other thoughts from anybody?
Yeah, so I have a nucleus of just another thing that might be worth considering. So I'm not quite sure about storing some of the information in I'm not sure about the element of make plan separate, but then keep some of the plan information on the storage class itself. I understand the motivation. I'm thinking that perhaps there might be something that we could do with a sub-resource where say that the service class itself doesn't actually have any of that information, but there's perhaps a sub-resource that you can do a get on for an individual service class that will give you some of that extra information, and you won't have to pull all of it down on the wire for an individual service. And I'm not sure if that is even viable. But that's the element of uncertainty that I have about it. I do want to continue thinking about it.
Just out of curiosity, is the sub-resource that you're describing, is that a resource that's sort of dynamically generated on the fly?
Yeah, say as a more specific example, say that you had a sub-resource on service class that was get with plans just for the sake of discussion. That's a terrible name. And when you get that sub-resource, you get the service class and the plans.
Is it possible? So I'm trying to understand how that works. Is it possible to get a list of all service classes with plans in one shot, or would you have to do an individual get per service class to do it?
Well, I had been referring to get for an individual service class. I think there is another problem of you want to potentially get all the service classes and some of the information about plans, but you don't need every single piece of information about them.
Well, that's the primary use case in my mind. It's show me what's in the catalog.
Getting all plans, not getting a subset of the individual class plus plan.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Because in my mind, it's equivalent of the CF marketplace command, right? I just want to see what's available for me to choose from, and I think that has to be a very quick operation.
I see a question in the chat about referential integrity and how etcd has transactions. So etcd does have transactions. The Kubernetes API does not have transactions and will never have transactions. So the referential integrity problem, yes, never. Never is a long time. So in the next 100 years, there will be no transactions.
So Doug, I wanted to go back to that use case. So you're saying that you want to be able to get all of the services and all the plans at the same time?
I want to be able to see what's available to me as an end user. And the user experience that I'm used to is the Cloud Foundry one, which shows me a list of services and a list of plan names, as well as a short description of the service and a flag on each plan name that tells me whether it's free or not.
Got it. So for now, because this is, I have two concerns or ideas, I guess, not really concerns. So one, we're right now really addressing the data, the API changes that we're going to need later to deal with scalability issues. I would venture to say that when we go to beta, I don't think there's going to be anyone who's got 10,000 service classes, each with, X number of plans. But we're just this is just the data format that we need to have to deal with that case later on, right? Does anyone disagree with that?
Well, yes and no. I agree with you that day one, we may not have 10,000 services with 10,000 plans on each one. I agree with that. But if the service class itself is so large because of things like the schema being injected in there,
Yeah. So yeah,
the net result may be the same thing.
Yes, that's my second point. So the data changes we're making here not only deal with changing the API before we have to freeze it, but they also deal with the storage problem, right?
Yeah.
So splitting out plans from services would solve both, but we don't necessarily need to be looking at or talking about the API as long as the data format that we have right now, or I should say the one that we're going to, can support it. And I think it does. It sounds like we can we could even build some kind of porcelain CLI that does exactly what we're talking about here. Even if it's very inefficient, we could do it if we need to get that use case.
I do think that we should decide. I think there is a very important API decision to make, which is, are service class and service plan the same resource? The rest of the stuff, I agree.
So to solve the storage problem, I don't see any way that service class and service plan can be the same resource.
Yes.
And then beyond that, I have my opinions on listing everything all at once. Others have other opinions, I'm sure, but I don't think we need to decide that now, as long as we can support both. And I think we can.
I agree.
Doug, what are your thoughts?
I think I agree, but to be honest, you lost me a little when you were describing when you were trying to basically separate out the problems from the data model from the API. But I do agree with what I think you both were saying, which was, chances are we're going to have to split these two resources, period. I think so far I'm hearing no disagreement on that, right?
I do not disagree with
Yeah,
that.
I agree.
Right. So then I think, Aaron, are you basically saying the next decision after the split one would be, okay, what properties appear on which resource and how do we, point between the two, right?
Yeah. I don't think it's the absolute next decision. I think we've got some time to make it, but it is a decision we'll have to make sometime in the nearish future, because after we're in beta or GA, someone's going to end up having 10,000 service classes, each with 10 plans, and they're going to want to see them all somehow.
Right. Okay. So
and that's when we'll have to figure that out.
Okay. So then going back to taking the next steps on this phone call, I think it's back to what you asked for earlier, which is give people 3 days or so to look at this and think about it and see if they're okay with the general direction of splitting the two. Then we can take the next step. If everybody's okay with that, they're saying, okay, someone needs to create an issue, a design, or even a PR that says, here's my proposal for how we split the two, and then we can hash on that. But at least we got past the initial high order bit question.
Agree.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll write that down on the notes.
Yeah, because even my proposal, I assumed we would tweak the exact list of properties I put there. I just wanted to put something out there as a straw man proposal to get us moving. And Paul, if you can, I would love to find out more information, in particular a pointer to an existing resource that has this sort of dynamic sub-resource thing you're talking about, so we can use that as a
there is no such thing yet.
Okay. Because I'd like to understand more about what you're thinking there, because my initial reaction to that was, well, if you can do a dynamic sub-resource, could that not simply be part of service class itself?
I think all the ideas I've had about it are terrible.
Oh, okay. That's one way to solve it, I guess, yeah. Okay. Okay, so let me go back and look what Aaron's writing in his notes. Hold on, I can't see. Okay.
Okay, so for those who can't see the doc, I wrote next steps as everyone reviews the proposal, and I also took note that we kind of unofficially decided that we're probably going to split plans from services, and someone is probably going to PR that as a prototype after we take the next few business days to decide on Doug's proposal issue number 454.
Right. Any questions, comments on that before we move on to the next agenda item? All right, cool. All right, next one. This one's bigger. It's the PodPreset stuff and bindings. This one encompasses lots of different issues, so let me try my best to try to summarize what I think may be one of the key points there. Obviously, there are going to be others, or there are many, I think, secondary issues, but I think probably the biggest issue here is, should some variant of PodPreset be embedded within the binding resource itself?
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
So I have spent a lot of time thinking about that. Let me put the information that I have on the table, which is, so for those that are like relatively new to the SIG, we historically have talked about PodPreset in a kind of naive type of way, in the sense of that reflects how it's currently implemented, which is that we talked about a PodPreset template being part of the binding resource, and that the controller would, after doing the open service broker binding, make the PodPreset. So I do not think that was necessarily a statement of like that is the exact right factoring. I view that now as more of like straw man conversation to illustrate the general concept of a linkage between binding and PodPreset. I have a couple pieces of data that make me think that they should definitely not be part of the same resource. So the first is community feedback. Nal doesn't like it. I've gotten feedback from Joseph Jacks and from Joe Beta that they did not think that it was a good idea to entangle PodPreset and open service broker binding. And I can think of, and so there's that feedback from the community, and just to walk through my.
Can I stop you just there for a sec? Even though I agree with that decision, do you have the explanation of why they didn't like it? I'd like to understand that.
So yeah, I'm getting to that. And I think that there are different motivations. So they all actually kind of boil down to the rationale being that people consider PodPreset to be either prescriptive and not exactly what they want, or not at all what they want. And they want to build some other type of integration on top of an open service broker binding, and that it is seen as a combination of too prescriptive and unnecessary API surface that might be better factored in another way to allow people to leverage PodPreset in a style that is like that is essentially the same as what we've discussed, without it having to be part of the open service broker binding. And along with this, I have some data points about the different integrations that people want to build. So, for example, PodPreset is a mechanism that is fundamentally rooted in in enabling decoupling between how something should be used and who should use it, so that pod authors that want to do the same type of injection that you currently have to do by making changes to the pod spec can express that knowledge as a separate resource and not have to reflect knowledge about how to use a particular thing in every pod spec that they want to use it in. But it's also like and so just to frame my own state of mind on this, I think that over the last 8-9 months, I have gone from a state of mind where, to me, that seemed like the only thing that you'd want to do, to, okay, that's perhaps what most people currently developing applications to run in Kubernetes might want to do, but I have other precedent, or not other precedent, I have some other use cases that I can point to now that I think are valid that we should enable. And I will name some of those immediately following my next couple sentences. I think that the PodPreset integration, if we agree that we want to enable other integrations on top of just the raw open service broker, dump stuff into a secret and then use it somehow, we should try to implement the PodPreset integration in such a way that it's a good example for how to implement another integration, with the extra knowledge that not everybody cares about everybody else's integrations, and that if we make additional integrations that are tacked onto binding, that it increases the complexity of the controller that has to back that resource. So to name a few things that I view as like either thematically different or just completely substantially different from PodPreset, I think that there's a valid use case of if you have an environment where people are deploying applications to both Kubernetes and Cloud Foundry, and I'm thinking of Doug's use case for Bluemix here, where Kubernetes is kind of the newcomer, and as far as I understand, like every application that's currently deployed into Bluemix with, modulo some like small number, is using the VCAP services method of getting service information about bindings. I think that is a valid use case to want to be able to do the same type of injection, which I think is like, it's not what PodPreset was designed to do. It's very different from the way that the Kubernetes ecosystem is used to treating things. But I will call this, for discussion's sake, VCAP services style injection. So that's one other type of integration that I see as being distinct from PodPreset. There's another integration that I think is probably outside the scope of what we are trying to accomplish in the SIG, which is an integration with Open Service Broker API that targets Kubernetes. PodPreset and VCAP services are two different flavors of that. I think that the Atlassian folks have designs on doing things like exposing information to resources that don't exist in Kubernetes. And that's part of why every time I've discussed this with Null, he's told me that I'm such an idiot for wanting to entangle PodPreset and binding. And just for the record, that's me making a joke. Null has only strongly implied that I'm an idiot. He's never said that I'm an idiot. And that itself is another joke. He's never implied it. I'm just joking. But I know that he doesn't like PodPreset being related to the binding resource.
Okay, so I'm a little lost here, but
I'm not done yet. That's why you're lost.
Let's take a pause for a second. So what I'm hearing is people in the community will say they don't like it because it too closely couples the binding, which is supposed to be a generic OSB integration style thing, with the specific way that binding credentials get into applications. Is that accurate?
Yes. I think also, like, at some point I think Willy from Google has mentioned that they have some use cases for cross-service dependencies. I have never had a chance to learn more about their use case. But
Neil, hold on one second.
Want to.
Neil, hold on one second. I wanna just make sure we have that foundation first.
Can you restate that, Aaron?
Yes. So, Neil, I do want to get into that, the cross-service thing at some point, but let me first make sure, maybe this is just me being selfish, but I want to make sure I get this foundation. So Paul, to restate it, tell me if this is correct. People in the community don't like coupling PodPreset too tightly with our binding, because it too tightly couples the OSB integration with the way that OSB binding credentials get put into pods.
Yes, that is a very succinct way of stating it.
I would clarify that just a little, though. I don't think it's the OSB way of injecting credentials into pods. It's the people are uncomfortable with the PodPreset way being, in essence, the preferred way.
Yeah, I think that is also true. And I will add to that there are also fundamentally different integrations that people want to do that PodPreset or VCAP services, as an example, do not address at all. For example, the Atlassian use case, and also as another example, one idea that I've heard discussed in other venues is having an integration that would alter other resources which aren't pods that are in the ecosystem, but they are not pods. And then there's also yet another flavor, which is you'd want to create wholly different resources, not alter another existing resource, but you've got some special pet resource that you want to, and pet is a really bad way to describe this. You have an arbitrary other resource that you want to manifest the binding into.
So I'll add another one, which is what we do is absolutely nothing. And when we install an instance, we use Helm. And when we update something, whether it's the instance or the application, we use Helm. And the application, the pod or the pod spec, consumes the same secret that the binding produces. So we don't rely on anything except for templating and Helm. Another data point for everyone to keep in mind.
Meaning you do not use PodPreset?
We never use PodPreset.
Okay.
Okay. So
also, time check. I have to leave in 6 minutes, so it's probably a good idea Doug, I saw you taking some notes, so probably a good idea for someone to take over. And Doug, would you be that someone?
I have a hard stop at the hour.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so let's stop here, or not. Let's start to wrap this up here, because I do want to respect people's time. But it sounds to me like, Paul, you gave a good background on why some people do not like embedding or are linking the two. Is there anybody on the call who wants to make an argument for keeping PodPreset inside of binding? Okay, not hearing that, it sounds like we have at least a high-level tentative decision that that's the direction we're going to go. Obviously, we need to get a couple of days' time for people to think about it who aren't on the call.
Yep.
But at least that's in a high-level decision. So it seems to me like the next decision point then is, okay, if we're splitting the two, what do we want to do about that, right? Do we want to create another type of resource, like Paul, you were suggesting one? Do we want to do anything at all and say, nope, you already have the building blocks? We don't need to decide that right now, but I think that's the next order of decision for us to discuss is what's the next step once we decide to split the two? And
Yeah, so
the next call.
I will go ahead and use the bully pulpit to share my own opinion.
Well, wait. Because I want to be respectful of people's time.
We've got 5 minutes, so can we get an action item out of this point?
Yeah, I'll take the action item to write up a note to the group, and a note to the group pointing to the issue, and then put the more detailed thing of what we just decided into the issue so people can look at it. But Paul,
Okay.
The reason I don't want you to get on the bully pulpit yet is because I do want a hard stop at the top of the hour. So let's first decide when the next meeting is, and then you can have at it.
How does tomorrow work for folks for another meeting?
Same time?
That's good for me.
Let me double check my own schedule here.
So we're
So I
talking,
also wanted to say that, so I had actually done some prototyping surrounding maybe what that would look like if we had a more generic abstraction for being able to consume secrets or consume credentials. So yeah, I have a prototype that I'd like to demo as well, if that's okay.
yeah, I think that should be the first thing we do on the call for the next discussion.
Cool, thank you. And I also wanted to say that to throw in another data point that we had talked to customers that were really interested in the catalog, but as far as they were already using existing systems such as Console and Vault to consume credentials. And so the integration there, being able to send it outside of Kubernetes in those specific cases was very important to them. So
I think that's different facet, good background. You should, if that's kibbles, right?
yeah.
You should create an issue for that because that is a different facet than what we've talked about before.
Okay, so let's circle back around before we run out of time. Is everybody okay with 4 p.m. Eastern tomorrow for the next phone call?
I can't do that, but I can do 4:30.
Can you do 4:30 to 5:30?
I can do 4:30 to 5:30.
Okay, anybody else on the call? Can everybody else do 4:30 to 5:30?
I am not available at all for tomorrow or Friday, so you guys go have at it.
Okay, anybody else on the call have an issue with 4:30 to 5:30 Eastern time? Okay, Paul, can you send out an invite?
I will send out the invite immediately after this, yeah.
Okay, in that case, you have 2 minutes to do your bully pulpit.
Okay, so here's my bully pulpit is that here the plus side of if we split PodPreset out of binding and we just have binding result in the creation of a secret is as one thing that we get from that is that we could build another resource that was the PodPreset integration with the binding. And the benefit of building another resource would be that you would get the behavior of the life cycle of this PodPreset would be managed with the life cycle of the binding so that you wouldn't have the PodPreset being created until the binding was ready. And when the binding was deleted, the PodPreset would also be deleted. And if you didn't want to use that, you could just manage, and you still wanted to use PodPreset, you could just not use that resource. And you'd be able then to just use PodPreset manually. I do think that there will probably, in all of the integrations that I know about, that there will probably be a number of them that do want to make another API resource of some type that does some work managed by the same life cycle as for the binding. EOF.
Okay. I think we're going to have to stop there to allow people time to get to the next phone calls. I think some people will have other calls. Any last comments, questions?
We haven't done one of these in a while, and it was fun. Thanks for joining, everybody.
Bye, guys.
See ya.